Graduation ceremonies in school may be canceled, but some of you are probably in the market and thinking about what you want your next machine to be for school when hopefully someday things go back to normal. They will, right? Right? And this is absolutely a common question I get, so I will probably update this video in the future. I've probably talked about this in the past, but what computer that's not a computer makes the most sense for school? Let's begin. Alright, the short answer, if you're not going to watch the whole video, is if possible, if financials allow you to, please try to get the iPad Pro with Magic Keyboard case, okay? I know it's expensive, I know that some of you want a Mac for certain things, but as a Mac user and someone who's owned the iPad Pro since it came out, this is an incredibly good combo. But it's an expensive one, for sure, and as I've noticed in the Apple Store app, it's becoming harder and harder to find the 2018 iPad Pro certified refurbished. It's starting to make me wonder if Apple is just not selling those at all because they want everyone to get the 2020 iPad Pro, but that one's a bit harder to recommend. Yeah, it's got the dual camera, it's got the A12Z chip, which is... it's basically the same. Got the LiDAR sensor, 6 gigs of RAM by default, 128 gigs by default, so storage, if that's important to you. There are some benefits with going to that one, but I have to say, 11-inch iPad Pro, which is cheaper with the Magic Keyboard case, is more like netbook territory. Yes, it's powerful, it's very flexible, you can do lots of fun things with the iPad, but typing on a keyboard and having a trackpad that compact and that small is, maybe a personal preference thing, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. The only people I would recommend getting the 11-inch iPad Pro are those who are only going to be using it as a tablet. But the truth is, Apple is making some pretty competitive prices with the MacBook Air in particular. So it starts at $1,000, but you should be able to get an educational discount if you're buying it for school, and that knocks $100 off the price. And I gotta admit, that's a pretty solid combo. I mean, it's cheaper than buying an iPad Pro and keyboard case, and you're getting, of course, a keyboard, a much larger trackpad built in by default. And no, you don't get the fun 120 hertz display, you don't get a good camera, you don't get rear-facing cameras or LiDAR, but at the end of the day, I know a lot of you guys in school are just looking for something to use the web on, watch videos, type documents, do PowerPoint, and macOS has years and years of legacy software support that you can run on that. So more than likely for your school, whatever your use case is, the MacBook Air is probably going to get the job done, just not in a super fun way. So yeah, it's got USB-C Thunderbolt 3 ports on it as well, the headphone jack if you care about that, and of course, heavily powered Pro apps are available on the MacBook. They may not run super great because that base model MacBook Air is not super powerful, but it's enough to do the basics, and I'm sure you can edit videos on that. I'm sure you could do logic tracks on that and Xcode. Obviously, if you need more power demanding things, the MacBook Pro is there, but absolutely way more expensive, and if you know you need those things, you probably don't need to watch this video in the first place. But the main reason I come back around on the iPad Pro, or maybe even the iPad Air if you're on a budget, is because I know there's a lot of classes and a lot of courses you guys take where it becomes extremely helpful to have a writing utensil, a stylus of some kind. Who wants a stylus, right? Well, I even had the Apple Pencil in my last year of school. Yes, I'm a college dropout, so you're taking a dropout's advice at this point, but it was incredibly helpful when I was in school to be able to take notes in math classes especially and be able to write out charts and numbers and map things out compared to on a laptop. Yeah, you can type, but sometimes you need to be able to draw layouts or charts or numbers and that kind of thing. So if you're into different kind of math classes like that, there are a ton of great apps on the iPad that allow you to take advantage of the stylus support. And yeah, the Apple Pencil one works with the iPad Air, or maybe if you're on a very limited budget, you can go with the cheap iPad that goes on sale like every other day. Please don't pay full price for the budget iPad. They will somewhere be on sale for $250, whether it be Amazon or 9 to 5 Toys. Just look around at least. But the charging mechanism for the Apple Pencil one does kind of suck. I defended it back when it came out, but honestly, it's so hard to defend now when the Apple Pencil 2 exists, because being able to just magnetically charge it alongside the iPad is so much easier. The battery life on this thing never dies to me because I'm just using it, and when you're not using it, it's charging. So like 90% of the time this thing is fully charged, and it just feels so much more sleek to dock it with the iPad. So my best case scenario I would recommend people looking around for is looking for sales, whether it be on Best Buy or Amazon, for the 2018 iPad Pro, right? Because this one is older than the new refreshed 2020 iPad Pro, but still has a lot of the benefits, like the speakers on the iPad Pro are amazing. The 120 hertz refresh rate you get on this thing looks so good, and maybe you don't notice it, but still, it's just an advantage over over the MacBook that you don't get on any Mac to this day. So now that they have built-in cursor support and it brings down the desktop version of websites, all of that online web stuff you do most of the time will probably work on the iPad. If it doesn't, it's probably just a super dated website anyway. And if you're worried about not having as many Pro app support, there are some great alternatives to the iPad like LumaFusion, Affinity Photo, fully fledged Photoshop is even available on the iPad. And if you're into graphic design or artwork or drawing for school or whatever classes you're taking, iPad will make a whole lot of sense for something you can draw with compared to a MacBook. So just being able to take the iPad out of its case is really, really handy and use it in different orientations. And if you're on the go a lot, maybe out and about exploring, iPad Pro does have cellular support. So I don't know what your carrier situation is, but again, that's something the MacBook cannot do. Though at the end of the day, probably don't go for cellular. Just hotspot off your phone. That's probably way cheaper. But also stay tuned for Worldwide Developers Conference, because it's rumored that apps like Final Cut, Logic, and Xcode are coming to the iPad Pro. So maybe shortly that won't be an advantage that the MacBook has, and eventually you'll be able to take advantage of Apple's Pro apps even on this platform. So yeah, if you can find these things on sale, they will be cheaper than the 2020 iPad Pros for sure when Apple sells them certified refurbished, which appears to be not that often these days. The 11-inch iPad Pro would go for like $550, and you could usually find a 12.9-inch iPad Pro for like $650 to $700, depending on the storage configuration and stuff like that. So don't be afraid to shop certified refurbished with Apple, because they replace the battery, they replace a lot of the components, and it will basically feel brand new if you buy certified refresh from Apple. But having a stylus, something to write numbers and charts and graphs with and do drawing, is really, really fun and handy for college compared to a MacBook, which is kind of all work, no play. You just kind of type on it. Maybe if you're taking a lot of English classes or writing classes, the MacBook would be fine. But while the Magic Keyboard case is very, very expensive, it does turn the iPad into a laptop, and in my opinion, it's the best two-in-one on the market, because you get a lot of the things students need a laptop for, while at the same time having a device that's very flexible, that can take good pictures, good video, and it's a lot more fun to use because the hardware on this thing is solid, and overall just much more futuristically designed than a MacBook is. Not to mention, if some of you have, partners or people that you're FaceTiming a lot these days, this is a way better FaceTime machine than a MacBook, simply because of how crappy the webcam is and better Wi-Fi connectivity with the iPad Pros. So if you couldn't tell, I'm leading everyone to go more with the iPads, just because I think they're more fun to use and they're getting more productivity features every day. The MacBooks are, they're there, but you should really only be looking at the MacBook Air or maybe an entry-level MacBook Pro if there's some type of application, there's some type of software, or there's some type of rare specific use case that only macOS is capable of that you're going to need for your school or college. And the iPad just simply can't do it. I know that there's a bunch of tiny little use cases out there that the iPad still can't do, but I'm hoping we squash those remaining cases over the next year, and do your best to look for some discounted 2018 iPad Pros, okay? They're out there. You can save a ton of money and still have a really high quality product. So also, before considering the iPad Air, which Apple currently sells new, also look at certified refurbished versions of the 2017 iPad Pro, because that is basically an iPad Air except with 120 hertz and better speakers, and the A10X chip is still really fast compared to the A12. And the iPad Pro 2017 accessories will still work with the iPad Air. That's of course if you're getting the 10.5-inch model, but I don't have much experience with those folio keyboard cases. Not sure if I'd recommend them as much, but they are cheaper, and you can still pair any old wireless mouse with your iPad and have mouse support. So there's discounted ways to do it, but MacBook Air should really only be considered for exclusive software features, whereas if you don't really have that many exclusive software requirements and you're just looking for something to type, write, get some schoolwork done, do some email, watch some videos, even play some games, iPad Pro, so much more fun. Anyway, if there's points I'm missing, feel free to hit me up over on Twitter, join my Discord, let me know what you guys think makes best for the machine for school. Thanks, Apple, for ruining the word computer indefinitely, because now people can't stop making the computer jokes. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.